I'm Stephanie Mitchell, 27, and I always thought family meant something. Until yesterday. After our annual family reunion, I checked my bank account on the drive home. My $87,000 in savings, gone. When I frantically called my dad, his response chilled me. "We needed it more than you did," he snorted dismissively. 5 years of 80-hour weeks, promotions I'd earned through sweat and tears, my down payment for a home, stolen by the people who were supposed to love me most. They had no idea what they'd just awakened in me. Before I start my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you. Trust me, you'll want to see how I handled this. Growing up in the Mitchell household had never been easy. While my friends had parents who taught them to save birthday money and build emergency funds, I had Raymond and Karen Mitchell. My financially reckless father and enabling mother who viewed money as something that existed only to be spent immediately. I learned about financial responsibility not through guidance but through negative example. Every bounced check, every frantic bill juggling session, every utility shut-off notice taped to our front door was my real education. By 16, I was working after school at a local grocery store, hiding my earnings in a lockbox beneath my bedroom floorboards because I'd learned early that any accessible money would mysteriously disappear for my parents' urgent needs. My younger brother Tyler was cut from the same cloth as our parents. 3 years my junior, he watched and learned their habits, adopting the same entitled attitude toward others' possessions and the same dismissive approach to financial planning. While I worked weekends, Tyler partied. While I applied for scholarships, Tyler expected our parents to somehow fund his community college tuition, which they attempted to do through a series of high-interest credit cards and loans from increasingly distant relatives. I escaped that cycle through sheer determination. 4 years of maintaining a perfect GPA while working 30 hours a week secured me a full scholarship to State University. Even then, it wasn't enough. Textbooks, housing, and living expenses meant working 2, sometimes 3 part-time jobs between classes. I graduated with a degree in finance, the irony not lost on me that I'd chosen a career focused on managing money. Now, at 27, I'd built a respectable career as a financial advisor at Maxwell Investment Group. My clients trusted me with their futures because I understood both the technical aspects of money management and the emotional relationship people have with their finances. I'd recently been promoted to senior advisor, the youngest in the firm's history to hold the position. That promotion came with a substantial raise, pushing my carefully accumulated savings to just over $87,000, the exact amount I needed for a 20% down payment on a modest condo in a safe neighborhood. After years of renting and building my financial foundation, I was weeks away from becoming a homeowner. I'd even scheduled a meeting with a mortgage broker for the following Monday. The annual Mitchell family reunion had been a tradition started by my grandfather Harold, the only financially stable influence in my life. His lakeside property had been the gathering place for extended family each summer since before I was born. Unlike my father, Grandpa Harold had built a successful construction business through decades of honest work and careful investment. He'd tried unsuccessfully for years to instill those values in his only son, my father. Grandpa Harold passed away 3 months ago at 84. His absence hung heavy over this year's reunion. The first without his booming laugh and wise presence. The reading of his will had been scheduled for the week after the reunion, which explained why relatives we rarely saw had suddenly made the effort to attend. The air was thick with forced pleasantries and speculative whispers about inheritance. I almost skipped this year's gathering. My relationship with my immediate family had grown increasingly strained as my financial stability contrasted with their perpetual crises. Over the years, I'd helped them in smaller ways, paying to fix Mom's car when it broke down, covering Tyler's rent for 2 months when he claimed he'd been laid off, sending Dad money for what he claimed were medical bills. Each time, I'd received vague thanks and subsequent requests for more. "Family helps family," my mother would say, her tone suggesting that my reluctance to hand over my hard-earned money made me somehow defective as a daughter. I'd learned to set boundaries, offering to pay bills directly rather than giving cash, which inevitably led to my parents calling me controlling and distrustful. Despite my misgivings, some sense of obligation pulled me back to the lake house one final time. Perhaps it was respect for Grandpa Harold's memory or some lingering hope that my achievement might finally earn me the respect I'd never received from my family. Whatever the reason, I packed an overnight bag, sent my out-of-office email response, and drove the 3 hours to my grandfather's lake house, unaware that I was driving straight into a trap set by the people who should have been protecting me. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the familiar driveway of Grandpa Harold's lake house. The 2-story cabin with its weathered wood exterior and expansive deck overlooking the water had always been my safe haven growing up. Now, seeing the collection of cars parked haphazardly on the lawn. My father's aging Cadillac, my mother's sensible sedan, Tyler's flashy leased sports car he couldn't afford, and several vehicles belonging to aunts, uncles, and cousins, sent an unexpected wave of anxiety through me. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my composure, when a sharp rap on my window startled me. My father, Raymond, stood there with an unusually broad smile. "There's my girl," he exclaimed as I stepped out, embracing me with an enthusiasm that felt foreign and uncomfortable. "We were beginning to think you weren't coming." His cologne was stronger than usual, his handshake firm as he took my overnight bag without asking. I noticed his watch, a new Rolex that definitely wasn't in his budget unless something had changed dramatically. "Nice watch, Dad," I commented casually. "This old thing?" he laughed, sleeve quickly covering it. "Just something I've had tucked away. Come on in, everyone's waiting." The next few hours were a strange performance of family bonding. My mother, Karen, hovered close, peppering me with questions about work while refilling my wine glass whenever it dipped below half full. "So the promotion came with a good raise, didn't it?" she asked, her voice deliberately casual. "Your father and I are so proud. You've always been so good with money, unlike the rest of us." She laughed, but her eyes remained calculating. Tyler, who normally barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings, suddenly became interested in my career path. "Senior financial advisor sounds impressive, sis," he said, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "You must be handling some pretty big portfolios now, huh? Any investment tips for your little brother?" My Aunt Judith, my father's sister who shared his approach to finances, cornered me by the snack table. "Family is everything, isn't it, Stephanie?" she mused, glass of scotch in hand. "I always tell my kids, we support each other no matter what. That's what separates us from everyone else. Mitchells stick together through thick and thin." Only my cousin Melanie seemed genuinely happy to see me without an agenda. We'd been close as children before life pulled us in different directions. She pulled me aside briefly while I was helping arrange dessert plates. "Be careful, Steph," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "There's been a lot of talk since Grandpa died. Just watch yourself, okay?" Before I could ask what she meant, my mother called everyone to dinner, and Melanie squeezed my arm before walking away. The dinner conversation centered around family memories of Grandpa Harold, but underneath ran currents of financial anxiety. Comments about tough times and family support peppered the conversation, with meaningful glances exchanged across the table. Midway through dinner, I realized I hadn't seen my phone in a while. I'd placed it on the side table when I arrived, but it was no longer there. When I mentioned it, there was a flurry of everyone checking under napkins and plates until Tyler found it beneath a chair across the room. "You should be more careful with your stuff, sis," he said with a smirk that made me uncomfortable. I checked it quickly, everything seemed normal, but for some reason, I felt uneasy. After dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom and passed by the guest room where I'd be staying. The door was ajar, and I caught a glimpse of my father quickly exiting, startled to see me. "Just making sure everything's comfortable for you," he explained, brushing past me toward the living room where boisterous laughter had erupted. When I returned to the gathering, my mother pressed another glass of wine into my hand. "A special vintage we've been saving," she insisted when I tried to decline. It tasted slightly bitter, but I took a few sips to be polite. Within 30 minutes, I felt strangely tired and disoriented. Far more than one glass of wine should cause. You look exhausted, honey, my mother observed with exaggerated concern. Why don't you turn in early? Tomorrow's another day. I didn't argue, my limbs feeling unusually heavy as I made my way to the guest room. The last thing I remember was collapsing onto the bed, still fully dressed, the room spinning around me. I woke the next morning with a pounding headache and the disorienting realization that it was past 11 a.m., much later than I ever sleep, even on weekends. Groggy and confused, I made my way to the kitchen to find only my parents and Tyler remaining. There she is, my father announced with forced cheer. Sleeping Beauty awakens. Where is everyone? I asked, accepting the coffee my mother pushed toward me. Oh, they all had to get an early start, she explained vaguely. You seemed so peaceful, we didn't want to wake you. You should probably get going too, my father added, checking his watch. Didn't you mention something about work tomorrow? Long drive back to the city. Their eagerness to see me leave struck me as odd, but my head was still pounding, and the atmosphere felt suddenly stifling. I gathered my things, made quick goodbyes, and was in my car within 20 minutes, my father practically escorting me to the vehicle. I was about 40 minutes into my drive home when my phone dinged with a banking alert. Pulling into a gas station, I opened the app to check, and felt the world collapse around me. My savings account balance, $126.42. My investment account, $0. My emergency fund, $0. $87,000, gone. Transferred out in 3 large transactions timestamped at 2:13 a.m., while I had been unconscious. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial my father's number. When he answered, his voice was eerily calm. Dad, I choked out, my money is gone. All of it. Someone transferred everything out of my accounts last night. The silence stretched for 3 beats before he responded. We needed it more than you did, Stephanie. Family helps family. I made a U-turn so sharp my tires squealed, heading back to the lake house with a fury I'd never known I was capable of feeling. The drive back to the lake house passed in a blur of rage and disbelief. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and tears streamed down my face, though I barely registered them. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like my entire identity was unraveling. These people, my blood, had drugged me and robbed me while I lay unconscious under their roof. I screeched to a halt in front of the house, gravel spraying from beneath my tires. The front door opened before I'd even stepped out of the car. My father stood in the doorway, arms crossed, my mother and brother flanking him like sentries. Stephanie, he began in a warning tone, you need to calm down and... What did you do? I screamed, storming toward them. How could you do this to me? I pushed past them into the living room, where I was surprised to find Aunt Judith still lingering, nursing what appeared to be her 3rd or 4th scotch of the day. Oh good, the prodigal daughter returns, she muttered. Show me what you did with my money, I demanded, turning back to my father. Show me right now. My father's expression hardened, the mask of earlier familial warmth completely gone. It's been taken care of. We had a family emergency. What emergency? I asked, my voice breaking. What could possibly justify stealing my entire savings? My mother stepped forward, eyes brimming with practiced tears. It's your brother, she said, placing a hand on Tyler's shoulder. He got mixed up with some bad people. Gambling debts. They were threatening him, threatening all of us. I looked at Tyler, who couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at the floor, shifting his weight uncomfortably. And this required all of my money? Everything I've worked for? You couldn't have asked me? Or taken out a loan? Or sold the house? My voice rose with each question. We tried everything, my father insisted. Banks won't lend to us anymore. The house is already mortgaged to the hilt. We had no choice, Stephanie. How did you even access my accounts? I asked, the horrifying realization dawning on me. My phone, you used my phone while I was unconscious. My father's silence confirmed it. You drugged me, I whispered, the full scope of their betrayal sinking in. You put something in my wine, took my phone, used my face to unlock it, and stole everything I had. Don't be so dramatic, Aunt Judith interjected from the couch. This is what family does, we look out for each other. Your grandfather would have understood. Grandpa Harold would never have approved of drugging and robbing your own daughter. I shouted. You've always been selfish, my mother hissed, dropping the tearful act. Ever since you were little, keeping your toys to yourself, hiding money, moving away from us. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I laughed bitterly. You've done nothing but take and take. I put myself through college. I built my career while you were still asking me for handouts. And now this? We're your family, my father said coldly. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I spat back. I'm calling the police. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. My father stepped toward me menacingly. Tyler finally looked up, panic in his eyes. You do that, my father said quietly, and you'll have no family left. Is that what you want? To put your own father in jail? Your mother? Your brother? Think about what that would do to your precious career, Stephanie, the financial advisor whose family are all criminals. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and an older man stepped in. I recognized him as Warren Calloway, my grandfather's best friend and fishing buddy. I heard shouting, he said, taking in the tense scene. Everything okay in here, Stephanie? They stole from me, Warren, I said, my voice breaking. They took everything. Warren's kind eyes hardened as he looked at my father. Is that true, Raymond? My father straightened his posture. This is family business, Warren. I think you should go. Harold asked me to keep an eye on things, Warren said evenly. Especially after he found out about your gambling debts. The room went silent. My mother's face drained of color. What gambling debts? I asked, looking between Warren and my ashen-faced father. Your father's been hitting the casinos hard since Harold got sick, Warren explained gently. Lost the construction business your grandfather built. Harold knew but didn't tell you because he didn't want to burden you. That's a lie, my father sputtered, but his eyes betrayed him. So there was no threat to Tyler? I asked, the pieces falling into place. No loan sharks or gambling debts for him? That was all you, Dad? No one answered, which was answer enough. I grabbed my purse and backed toward the door. I'm going to the police. I'm going to get my money back. You'll regret this, my father called after me as I rushed out. Family protects family, Stephanie. You go to the police, and you're no longer a Mitchell. I drove away from the lake house for the second time that day, this time with tears blinding me and my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the car. My entire world had collapsed, and I couldn't process the magnitude of the betrayal. I didn't see the truck running the stop sign until it was too late. The impact was deafening, metal crunching, glass shattering, airbags deploying in an explosion of white. My car spun across the intersection before coming to rest against a telephone pole. Pain exploded through my body as darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. The last thought I had before losing consciousness was that my family had not only stolen my money, they might have cost me my life as well. I awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell that seems universal to all medical facilities. For a brief, blissful moment, I couldn't remember why I was there. Then the events came rushing back, the theft, the confrontation, the accident, and I felt physically ill. Hey, you're awake, a soft voice said. My friend Alicia sat in a chair beside the bed, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been there for some time. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, I croaked, then added, literally. The doctors say you're lucky. Concussion, broken wrist, some bruised ribs, but nothing life-threatening. She hesitated. Stephanie, what happened? The nurse said no family members have called or visited. The absence of my family wasn't surprising, but it still stung. I told Alicia everything: the drugging, the theft, the confrontation, Warren's revelation about my father's gambling. By the end, she was staring at me in horror. "We need to call the police," she said immediately, reaching for her phone. The officer who responded, Jasmine Carter, was sympathetic but not particularly hopeful. "Family financial disputes are complicated," she explained after taking my statement. "Especially when access was granted using your own phone and Face ID. Your father could claim you authorized the transfers, and it becomes your word against his." "But I was drugged," I protested. "Which would be easier to prove if we'd done a toxicology screen immediately," Officer Carter said gently. "But it's been over 24 hours now. Many common sedatives wouldn't show up anymore." She promised to file a report but warned me that the district attorney rarely pursued cases between family members without overwhelming evidence. "You might have better luck in civil court," she suggested before leaving. Over the next few days in the hospital, I began researching financial crimes and statute of limitations on my phone. The more I read, the more I realized that Officer Carter was right: the legal system wasn't designed to handle what had happened to me. Family members stealing from each other fell into a gray area that often went unpunished. After being discharged, I met with Nathan Brooks, a lawyer specializing in financial crimes. His office was small but meticulously organized, much like the man himself. "Your case isn't hopeless," he told me after I explained everything, "but it won't be easy. Your best bet is to gather as much evidence as possible before we file anything." With Nathan's guidance, I hired a private investigator, Darius Jackson, who specialized in financial fraud. His first discovery was illuminating: my father had accumulated over $150,000 in gambling debts in the past year alone. He's been hitting underground poker games, online gambling sites, and 3 different casinos within driving distance, Darius reported. "And this isn't new behavior. I found records going back 5 years, though it escalated significantly after your grandfather became ill." Further investigation revealed that my parents had a history of financial fraud that I'd never known about. They'd taken out loans in my grandfather's name while he was ill. They'd opened credit cards using Tyler's information when he turned 18. They'd even attempted to refinance Grandpa Harold's lake house using forged documents. Most shocking was learning that Tyler had never been in debt to anyone. He'd been complicit in their scheme from the beginning, allowing them to use his name for loans and credit cards in exchange for cash. "Your brother's actually doing quite well for himself," Darius said, showing me bank statements. "He's got an account with almost $30,000 in it, money that appears to have been transferred directly from your accounts after the theft." The betrayal cut even deeper. While I'd been working myself to exhaustion to build my savings, my family had been plotting to take it all. Through Warren Calloway, I discovered something else: my grandfather's actual will was different from what my father had claimed. Grandpa Harold had left the lake house and the majority of his assets to me, not to be divided equally among family as my father had insisted. "Harold knew Raymond would burn through everything," Warren explained over coffee. "He set up a trust for you because he was proud of how responsible you'd become. Your father found out and convinced the family lawyer, who was suffering from early dementia, to alter some documents. I'd been gathering evidence since Harold passed, but I needed time to build the case. It was all connected: my father's desperation, the timing of the theft just before the official will reading, the family's unusual behavior at the reunion. They'd known they were about to lose access to Grandpa Harold's assets when the legitimate will was revealed, so they'd taken what they could get their hands on: my savings." With this knowledge, I worked with Nathan to develop a 3-part plan. First, we would build an airtight case documenting the theft, the drugging, and the broader pattern of financial fraud. Second, we would pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery. Third, we would challenge the altered will to reclaim my grandfather's estate. Meeting with the bank's security team provided further evidence. The transfers had indeed been made from my phone, but at 2:13 a.m. while the device's location showed it was at the lake house, a time when I was unconscious from what was likely a sedative in my wine. What was most disturbing was discovering through bank records that my family was already spending my money at an alarming rate. Large cash withdrawals, transfers to gambling sites, a new car for Tyler, and several luxury purchases suggested they were burning through my savings as quickly as possible. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the theft, the accident, the physical pain, and the knowledge that my own family had plotted against me, became overwhelming. One night, alone in my apartment with my arm in a cast and my savings gone, I found myself standing on my balcony, looking down 12 floors to the street below. For a moment, I considered how easy it would be to end the pain, to stop fighting. My family had taken everything I'd worked for. My career was in jeopardy. How could I advise others on financial security when I'd failed to protect my own? I had no home to return to, no family I could trust, and a legal battle ahead that might never recover what I'd lost. I stepped closer to the edge, the cool night air washing over me. Then my phone chimed with an email alert. A response from the district attorney's office agreeing to meet about my case. That small sound pulled me back from the brink. I stepped away from the edge, a sudden clarity washing over me. If I gave up, they won completely. If I fought, I might lose the battle but would preserve my dignity and self-respect. In that moment, standing on my balcony between despair and determination, I made my choice. I would not be their victim. I would be their reckoning. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose. My first action was to set up monitoring systems on all my remaining financial accounts, credit cards, my nearly empty checking account, and my 401k, which thankfully my family hadn't been able to access. I created alerts for any login attempts, password changes, or unusual activity. Nathan helped me establish a clear digital evidence trail of the theft. We documented every transaction, every unauthorized access, and every piece of evidence showing I couldn't have willingly authorized the transfers. The bank's security team provided logs showing the exact location of my phone during the transfers, the lake house at 2:13 a.m., and timestamps from the security cameras at the gas station where I'd discovered the theft the next day. With Darius's help, I began strategically communicating with various family members, recording every conversation as permitted by our state's one-party consent laws. My approach was to appear confused and hurt rather than accusatory, drawing them into making damaging admissions. "I just don't understand, Aunt Judith," I said tearfully during a phone call. "Why would Dad take everything without even asking me first?" "Oh, honey," she sighed, clearly tipsy as usual. Raymond was desperate. Those gambling debts weren't going away, and when he found out Harold was leaving everything to you, well, he felt cheated. You have to understand, in his mind, that money should have been his inheritance. Each conversation yielded similar revelations. My mother admitted the drugging was her idea, just a couple of sleeping pills to help you rest, while minimizing its significance. Tyler bragged about how easy it was to use my face to unlock my phone while I was unconscious. With enough preliminary evidence gathered, Nathan and I met with Assistant District Attorney Marcus Hernandez, who, unlike Officer Carter, saw potential in my case. "Financial elder abuse is a priority for our office," he explained, referring to the forged documents and loans taken out in my grandfather's name. "And the drugging elevates the theft from a family dispute to something much more serious. If we can prove they sedated you specifically to access your accounts, that's premeditated." Just as our legal strategy was gaining momentum, my family discovered what I was doing. The first threat came via text from my father. "Drop this now, Stephanie. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." When I didn't respond, the messages escalated. "No one will believe you. You'll look like a bitter daughter trying to hurt her family. Think about your career." Then from Tyler, "You really want to see your own brother in jail? Over money? What kind of person does that make you?" My mother took a different approach, showing up at my apartment unannounced one evening. I was thankful I'd had the foresight to install a security camera at my door after the accident. "Stephanie, please," she begged, her eyes wet with tears that I now recognized as completely manufactured. "Your father made a mistake. We all did. But we're still your family, the only one you'll ever have. Can't we work this out between us? I let her in, pretending to consider reconciliation while the recording app ran on my phone in my pocket. Maybe you're right, I said, watching her face light up with the belief she was winning. I just need to understand why. Why take everything? Why not just ask me for help? Oh, sweetheart, she said, patting my hand condescendingly, you've always been so rigid about money. Raymond knew you'd never give us what we needed, not the full amount. And after what your grandfather did, cutting Raymond out of the will like that, it just wasn't fair. So this was revenge? Against me and Grandpa Harold? Not revenge, she corrected quickly. Justice. Raymond deserved that inheritance, not you. We just took what should have been ours anyway. Every word was being recorded, every admission building my case stronger. The culmination of this strategy was a reconciliation dinner I suggested at a neutral restaurant. My father, mother, brother, and Aunt Judith all attended, believing I was ready to drop the legal proceedings in favor of family peace. I wore a wire provided by the district attorney's office, who had become increasingly interested in my case as the evidence mounted. Their instructions were clear: get them talking about the theft, the drugging, and their motives. Over appetizers and drinks, I played my role perfectly, the hurt daughter who wanted to understand rather than punish. I just need to know the truth, I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound wounded but not accusatory. If we're going to move forward as a family, I need to know exactly what happened and why. Perhaps it was the expensive scotch loosening his tongue, or maybe it was simply the belief that he'd won, but my father finally admitted everything. The gambling got out of hand, he confessed, swirling his drink. After your grandfather got sick, I was stressed. The casinos were an escape. By the time I realized how deep I was, it was too late. But why take my money? All of it? I owed people who don't take payment plans, he said darkly. And when I found out your grandfather changed his will to cut me out, well, something had to be done. The money should have been mine to begin with. So the sleeping pills and my wine. My mother jumped in, surprisingly cavalier now that she thought I'd forgiven them. Just a little something to make sure you wouldn't wake up while we handled things. No real harm done. And accessing my accounts? I pressed. Tyler smirked. That was actually pretty clever. We figured your phone probably had facial recognition, and we were right. Held it up to your face while you were out cold, worked like a charm. Aunt Judith, several glasses of wine in, added the final damning piece. It wasn't just about the money, dear. Your father has been planning this since Harold changed his will. We all knew you'd get everything, and Raymond couldn't stand the thought of his own father choosing you over him. Every word was being captured, every admission building an airtight case against them. After dinner, I hugged each of them goodbye, promising to put this unfortunate episode behind us. As soon as I was in my car, I called Ada Hernandez. We got it all, I confirmed. Every admission, every detail. With the recordings and mounting evidence, we began the legal proceedings in earnest. A civil suit to recover my stolen funds was filed alongside criminal charges for fraud, elder abuse, theft, and administering a controlled substance without consent. As the legal machinery began to move, the threats against me escalated. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Emails from untraceable accounts describing my daily routines in disturbing detail. A dead bird left on my welcome mat. My family was growing desperate, and I knew from experience that desperate people were dangerous. What I didn't realize was just how far they were willing to go to silence me. I was working late one evening, preparing financial documents for my case, when I heard a noise at my apartment door. Thinking it might be another threatening gift, I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Nothing. I was turning away when the door crashed open, the frame splintering as it was kicked in. Tyler stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage and fear. "Where is it?" he demanded, shoving past me into the apartment. "Where's what?" "Tyler, what are you doing?" I backed away, fumbling for my phone. The recording, he snarled, overturning my coffee table. Dad knows you were wired at dinner. He's going to jail because of you unless we find that recording. The police already have it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's too late, Tyler. He advanced on me, his eyes wild. Then you're going to call them and tell them you made it all up. That you transferred the money yourself and got cold feet about some investment. I'm not doing that, I said firmly, though my heart was pounding. You all stole from me. You drugged me. You betrayed me in every possible way. His hand shot out, grabbing my injured wrist and twisting. Pain exploded up my arm as I cried out. You think you're so much better than us, he hissed. Always have. The perfect daughter, the responsible one, Grandpa's favorite. You have no idea what it was like growing up in your shadow. So that justifies stealing everything I worked for? I gasped through the pain. You didn't work for that inheritance, he spat. You just happened to be Harold's pet. The rest of us got nothing while you were set up for life. The inheritance is separate from what you stole, I managed to say. That was money I earned. Every dollar. Something in my words seemed to enrage him further. He shoved me backward, and I stumbled, hitting my head against the wall. Stars exploded in my vision as he began ransacking my apartment, tearing through drawers and cabinets. While he was distracted, I crawled toward the kitchen, where I kept a small canister of pepper spray. Before I could reach it, Tyler noticed my movement and lunged after me. What happened next was chaos, a struggle, my pepper spray discharging, Tyler howling in pain, a lamp crashing to the floor. In the confusion, I managed to reach the door and flee into the hallway, screaming for help as I ran toward the elevator. A neighbor opened their door, took one look at my bleeding face, and pulled me inside, locking the door behind us and calling 911. When the police arrived, Tyler was gone, but my apartment was destroyed. As officers photographed the damage and took my statement, my phone rang, Warren Calloway. Stephanie, he said, his voice grave. I need to see you immediately. It's about your grandfather's collection. What collection? I asked, confused. His vintage watches and coins. Harold told me they were worth close to $100,000, meant for you. I went to check the safe at the lake house today, and it's empty. Your father must have cleaned it out. The hits kept coming. Not only had my family stolen my savings, but they'd also looted my inheritance before I could claim it. After the police left, promising to send a patrol car to watch my building, I met Warren at a 24-hour diner, my face still swollen from the confrontation with Tyler. There's more, Warren said, sliding a folder across the table. I found these in Harold's desk. He had a second property, a small cabin up in the mountains. No one in the family knows about it except me. The deed is in your name, transferred 6 months before he died. I stared at the documents in shock. Why wouldn't he tell me about this? He was afraid Raymond would find out, Warren explained. The cabin was Harold's sanctuary, where he kept his most important papers and valuables. He wanted you to have a safe place, away from your father's influence. This revelation changed everything. If Grandpa Harold had left additional assets in a location my father didn't know about, I might still have a financial future after all. The next morning, I went to work, despite my injuries and the previous night's trauma. I needed normalcy, needed to prove to myself that I could still function. But as I settled at my desk, my boss, Jonathan Maxwell, called me into his office. Stephanie, he said gravely, we need to discuss your situation. My heart sank as he explained that clients were expressing concern about the rumors surrounding my family drama. The financial advising business was built on trust, and the publicity from my case was creating problems. I'm going to have to place you on administrative leave, he concluded. Paid, of course, but we need to let this situation resolve before you return to client-facing roles. It was a devastating blow. My career had been my anchor, the one thing my family hadn't managed to destroy. Now, that too was slipping away. As I drove home, my mind racing with this new setback, I noticed a car following me, the same one I'd spotted outside my office and again near my temporary apartment. My family was having me watched. I tried to lose the tail, making random turns and doubling back, but the car stayed with me. Panic rising, I called Officer Carter, who advised me to drive directly to the police station. I never made it there. As I accelerated onto the highway, trying to put distance between myself and my pursuer, I noticed something wrong with my car's handling. The steering wheel began to shudder violently in my hands, and when I tapped the brakes, the pedal went straight to the floor. No response. The speedometer climbed past 80 as I desperately pumped the useless brake pedal. Ahead, traffic was slowing for construction. I yanked the emergency brake, but it too failed. In desperation, I veered toward the shoulder, hoping to use friction to slow down. The guardrail appeared in my headlights a split second before impact. Metal screamed against metal as my car scraped along the barrier, sparks flying. Then the front tire caught, and the world spun violently as my car flipped once, twice, before coming to rest upside down in a ditch. The last thing I remembered was the taste of blood and the distant wail of sirens as darkness closed in. I awoke in the hospital for the second time in a month, this time in much worse shape. Broken ribs, fractured collarbone, concussion, and various lacerations. The police officer standing guard outside my door told me everything I needed to know before the doctor even spoke. "Someone tampered with your brake lines," Officer Carter confirmed when she visited. "This wasn't an accident, Stephanie. Someone wanted you dead." As I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and under police protection, I realized the stakes had changed dramatically. This was no longer just about money or justice. My family was trying to silence me permanently. That same day, my father was arrested for attempted murder. The news of Raymond Mitchell's arrest for attempted murder sent shockwaves through our extended family and community. Local newspapers ran headlines like "Financial Advisor's Father Arrested in Murder Plot" and "Family Fraud Turns Deadly." My private nightmare had become very public. The preliminary hearing was scheduled quickly due to the serious nature of the charges. My father hired Curtis Hamilton, an expensive criminal defense attorney known for representing white-collar criminals and getting reduced sentences. I watched from my wheelchair, still recovering from the second accident, as my father was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, his confident swagger replaced by a hunched posture and darting eyes. When our gazes met, he quickly looked away. Curtis Hamilton's strategy became clear immediately: paint me as a vindictive daughter making false accusations to punish her family over a financial disagreement. Miss Mitchell authorized these transfers herself, Hamilton claimed in his opening statement. When she had second thoughts about an investment gone wrong, she constructed this elaborate tale of theft and drugging to avoid responsibility for her own poor financial decisions. The prosecutor, Ada Hernandez, methodically dismantled this narrative with evidence. The toxicology report from my hair sample that showed traces of zolpidem, a prescription sleep medication my mother had been taking for years. The bank records showing transfers at 2:13 a.m. while my phone's location placed it at the lake house. The recorded admissions from the reconciliation dinner. Most damning was the mechanic's testimony about my brake lines. "They were deliberately cut," he stated firmly. "Not completely, just enough to fail when the brakes were applied with force at high speed. This was intentional tampering, designed to look like a catastrophic brake failure." The case garnered media attention, and as details emerged, other victims began coming forward. Two of my father's former business associates described similar patterns of fraud. A cousin revealed that my parents had pressured her elderly mother, my great-aunt, into changing her will while heavily medicated after surgery. My mother, seeing which way the wind was blowing, attempted to distance herself from my father. She approached me through her attorney, offering to testify against him in exchange for immunity. "Karen Mitchell wants the court to know she was manipulated by her husband," her lawyer explained during a private meeting. "She was afraid of him and felt she had no choice but to go along with his schemes." I declined the offer. The recording of her casually discussing drugging me would speak for itself. Tyler, however, seized the opportunity for self-preservation. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to testify about the years of financial fraud, the plot to steal my savings, and my father's rage when he discovered I was building a legal case. Dad said if Stephanie kept pushing, he'd make sure she couldn't testify, Tyler admitted on the stand, unable to meet my eyes. He asked me to mess with her car. I refused, but I guess he found someone who wouldn't. Aunt Judith's testimony proved unexpectedly damning. Perhaps motivated by self-preservation, or perhaps by the multiple scotches she'd consumed before taking the stand, she painted a comprehensive picture of my father's years of financial manipulation and rage toward me. Raymond couldn't stand that Stephanie was successful on her own, she slurred slightly. He always said she thought she was better than everyone else because she had a fancy job and savings. When Harold changed his will to leave everything to her, Raymond became obsessed with getting what he saw as his rightful inheritance. Financial forensic evidence presented by the prosecution showed the rapid dispersal of my stolen savings, $30,000 transferred to Tyler, $22,000 to a casino to settle outstanding debts, $15,000 for a luxury watch, and the remainder spread across various cash withdrawals and luxury purchases. When my turn came to testify, I wheeled myself to the witness stand, still unable to walk without assistance due to my injuries. The courtroom fell silent as I recounted the betrayal, the theft, the drugging, and the 2 accidents that had nearly claimed my life. The money wasn't even the worst part, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. It was learning that my family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had been plotting against me for years. That they valued money more than my life. During cross-examination, Curtis Hamilton tried to suggest I'd always been estranged from my family, that I looked down on them, that I'd denied them help when they needed it. Isn't it true that you refused to help your family financially multiple times over the years? He asked. I helped them repeatedly, I corrected him. I paid to fix my mother's car. I covered my brother's rent when he claimed he was laid off, though I now know he was never actually in financial trouble. I sent money for what my father claimed were medical bills. What I didn't do was hand over my entire savings without question. And yet you expected to inherit everything from your grandfather? Hamilton pressed. I expected nothing, I replied truthfully. I didn't even know Grandpa Harold had changed his will until after his death. I worked for every dollar in my savings account, the money that was stolen from me. Surprisingly, some of the strongest support came from extended family members I barely knew. Distant cousins, great-aunts, and family friends approached me after court sessions to share their own stories of financial manipulation by my father. Raymond borrowed $10,000 from me 5 years ago, one elderly great-uncle confided. Never saw a penny back. When I asked about it, he said family doesn't charge interest. Then he stopped taking my calls. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning their verdict, guilty on all counts. My father was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. My mother received 5 years for her role in the drugging and theft. Tyler, due to his cooperation, was sentenced to 3 years with eligibility for parole after 1. Aunt Judith escaped criminal charges but was named in my civil suit, which was quickly settled in my favor. The court ordered full restitution of my stolen savings, though I knew recovering the actual money would be difficult since most of it had already been spent. The greater victory came with the challenging of the altered will. With Warren's evidence and testimony, the probate court invalidated the fraudulent documents and upheld my grandfather's original will, granting me ownership of the lake house and his remaining assets. In the aftermath of the trial, my family fractured completely. My father, facing a lengthy prison sentence, refused all visitors, including my mother. She, in turn, filed for divorce while awaiting her own prison term, claiming she'd been a victim of his manipulation all along. Tyler wrote me a letter from jail, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging the harm he'd caused. I don't expect you to ever trust me again, he wrote. I wouldn't in your place. But I want you to know I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what we did to you. Aunt Judith disappeared back to Florida, cutting contact with everyone associated with the trial. Other family members took sides, some supporting me, others maintaining that I had destroyed the family by pursuing legal action instead of handling things privately. My professional reputation, which I'd feared was irreparably damaged, began to recover as the full story emerged. Jonathan Maxwell called me personally to invite me back to work once I was physically able. "Your handling of this situation demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity we want in our advisors," he told me. "When you're ready to return, there's a promotion waiting for you, heading up our new division focused on protecting clients from financial fraud." It was a first step toward rebuilding my life, though the emotional wounds would take far longer to heal than my physical ones. 6 months after the trial concluded, I stood on the deck of the lake house, my lake house now, watching the sun set over the water. The autumn leaves reflected fiery gold and crimson on the lake's surface, a beauty that contrasted sharply with the ugliness of everything that had happened here. My financial situation had stabilized, though not completely recovered. The court-ordered restitution had resulted in recovering about 60% of my stolen savings. My father's assets were seized and liquidated, my mother's jewelry and art collection sold at auction, and Tyler's car and electronics confiscated. It wasn't everything, but combined with my grandfather's estate, it gave me a solid foundation to rebuild upon. My career had not only recovered but flourished. Maxwell Investment Group had created a new division specializing in protecting vulnerable clients from financial exploitation, with me as the director. My personal experience had given me insights that benefited clients in ways textbooks never could. I'd even been invited to give a keynote speech at a national conference on family financial abuse. A growing problem that received too little attention. My family members had scattered to their various fates. My father was serving his sentence at a medium-security prison, where he'd reportedly joined a gambling addiction support group. According to prison officials, he was a model inmate, though I maintained my distance, ignoring his occasional letters. My mother, serving her 5-year sentence, had reinvented herself as a victim rather than a perpetrator. She'd given jailhouse interviews claiming she'd been controlled and manipulated by my father throughout their marriage, painting herself as another of his victims rather than his willing accomplice. Few were convinced, but it seemed to give her some comfort to believe it herself. Tyler was already eligible for parole, having served 14 months of his 3-year sentence. His cooperation had earned him a reduced sentence and placement in a minimum security facility with a work release program. He'd written me several times, each letter a little more introspective than the last. I read them but hadn't yet decided whether to respond. Aunt Judith had moved to Arizona and, according to family gossip, had entered rehab for her alcoholism. She'd sent a brief, awkward apology card for her role in the theft but made no mention of her testimony or the years of enabling my father's behavior. Cousin Melanie, whose warning I hadn't fully understood at the time, had become a surprising source of support. We'd reconnected after the trial, and she'd helped me sort through Grandpa Harold's belongings at the lake house, sharing memories and rebuilding a relationship that had been severed by family dysfunction. "You know," she said during one of her visits, "I always knew you were Grandpa's favorite, but I never resented you for it. You were the only one who really understood him." Her words had prompted me to revisit the cabin in the mountains that Warren had told me about. The property my grandfather had secretly transferred to me before his death. I'd been there only once since learning of its existence, shortly after the trial when I was still healing both physically and emotionally. Now, standing on the deck of the lake house, I made the decision to return to the mountain cabin the next day. There was something unfinished there, something I needed to explore more thoroughly. The cabin was smaller than the lake house but beautifully constructed, tucked away on 20 acres of wooded mountainside. As before, I used the hidden key Warren had shown me and stepped into the rustic interior that smelled of pine and memories. This time, I came with a purpose. Warren had mentioned that my grandfather kept important documents here, and I wanted to thoroughly search for anything I might have missed during my brief first visit. In the small office area, I examined the bookshelves more carefully, running my fingers along the edges. Behind a row of leather-bound classics, my fingers caught on something, a small latch that, when pressed, released a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was a safe I hadn't discovered during my previous visit. Beside it was an envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter and a combination. My dearest Stephanie, the letter began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered my true legacy to you. I've watched you grow from a determined little girl who counted her pennies into a woman of integrity and wisdom. You alone in our family understood that wealth isn't about possessions but about character. Your father never learned this lesson, despite my best efforts. I failed him as a father in many ways, and for that, I'm sorry. But I succeeded in being your grandfather, and that brings me comfort in my final days. In this safe, you'll find the family heirlooms that matter. Not for their monetary value, though that is considerable, but for the stories they carry. There are also documents detailing accounts I've set up for you that Raymond knows nothing about. Use these resources wisely, as I know you will. Remember, true family is built on love and trust, not blood. Create your own family, Stephanie, with people who value you for who you are, not what you have. With all my love, Grandpa Harold. Tears streamed down my face as I carefully opened the safe using the combination provided. Inside were velvet pouches containing my grandmother's jewelry, rare coins my grandfather had collected throughout his life, and several vintage watches in perfect condition. Financial documents revealed offshore accounts and investments worth nearly twice what had been stolen from me. But the true treasure was a collection of photographs and letters, a documented history of our family before greed and resentment had poisoned it. Pictures of my father as a smiling child, my grandfather teaching him to fish, family gatherings filled with genuine joy. It was a glimpse of what could have been, what should have been, and it broke my heart even as it helped heal it. Among the papers was a sealed envelope marked, "For Raymond, to be delivered at your discretion." Inside was a letter from my grandfather to my father, written shortly before his death. It was a combination of apology for his own failings as a parent and a plea for my father to change his ways before it was too late. I sat on the cabin floor, surrounded by my inheritance, both material and spiritual, and made a decision that surprised even me. I would visit my father in prison. Not to forgive him, not to re-establish a relationship, but to deliver my grandfather's final message and close that chapter of my life completely. 2 weeks later, I sat across from my father in the prison visiting area. He looked older, diminished, his once imposing presence reduced to a man in a standard-issue jumpsuit who couldn't meet my eyes. "I didn't think you'd come," he said finally, his voice raspy from disuse. "Neither did I admitted. But Grandpa Harold wanted you to have this." I slid the letter across the table. He stared at it for a long moment before picking it up with trembling hands. "I've read it," I told him. "It's not what you think. He didn't hate you. He was disappointed in your choices, but he never stopped loving you." My father's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "No," I agreed, "you don't. But that's what real love is. It's not earned or deserved. It's given freely, even when it's not reciprocated." I stood to leave, having said what I came to say. "Stephanie," he called as I turned away. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know that doesn't change anything, doesn't fix what I broke. But I need you to know I understand now what I've lost. It wasn't the money or the inheritance. It was you. My daughter." I paused, not turning back. "Goodbye, Dad." As I walked out of the prison, I felt a weight lifting, not forgiveness, exactly, but acceptance. What my family had done was unforgivable, but I wouldn't let it define me or my future. Back at the lake house, I hosted my first gathering, a small circle of true family, Melanie, Warren, Alicia, and a few trusted friends who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. As we shared a meal on the deck where months earlier my biological family had plotted against me, I realized Grandpa Harold had been right. Family isn't defined by blood but by love, trust, and mutual respect. I had lost the family I was born into, but in the process, I had found the family I deserved. In the year since that terrible family reunion, I'd lost my savings, been betrayed by those who should have protected me, nearly lost my life twice, and had my world turned upside down. But I had survived, reclaimed what was rightfully mine, and emerged stronger and wiser. The financial advisor in me appreciated the irony. Sometimes the greatest returns come from the most devastating losses. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in breathtaking colors, I raised a glass to my grandfather's memory and to the future I was now free to build on my own terms. Sometimes, the family you choose is the one that truly matters. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have pursued justice even at the cost of family relationships, or would you have handled things differently? Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone who was supposed to protect you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the integrity of those you surround yourself with.